how open-mindedness works. In this episode, we're going to be revisiting the classic topic of open-mindedness that I've talked about in the past. I've referred to it as radical open-mindedness. This is the master key that you need if you care to understand reality to any significant degree. This is your biggest obstacle. This is the number one obstacle that people have when it comes to understanding reality. And by understanding reality, I mean everything, all of it, every aspect of reality, holistically, and how all of the different facets fit together and relate to you and to your life. So if you want to understand yourself at a deep level, if you want to understand emotions at a deep level, if you want to understand humanity at a deep level, society at a deep level, reality, science, religion, spirituality, metaphysics, philosophy, if you want to understand all of this stuff, radical open-mindedness is the key. But what is open-mindedness really? Let's take a deep look. Openness versus closedness, these are features of the mind. Your mind can either be open or it can be closed. And of course, this is not a simple binary. There's a spectrum of degrees here. There are many degrees of open-mindedness. And even if you fancy yourself an open-minded person, I would challenge you to stick around and keep listening, because it's not enough just to be open-minded. It's a question of how open-minded are you? Like, really, how deeply open-minded are you? And chances are, if you're following along with me and you've been watching my content for years or for months even, you have to be a relatively open-minded person, more so than the average person in society. But that's still not going to cut it for you to really be able to understand reality at the levels that we're interested in here. So I guess the key point of this episode is going to be more experiential than just theoretical. I'm going to be giving you theory and insights about open-mindedness and so forth. That's all good. But the most important takeaway I want you to get here is that openness has a certain feel to it, and closedness has a certain feel to it. And I want to help you to experientially draw a distinction in your mind. This is going to be something you learn here today, and you take away with you for the rest of your life if you learn it. This distinction, it's an experiential distinction between the difference of when your mind is open and when your mind is closed. And see, we're going to be looking at the topic of open-mindedness here now, not just from a macro perspective, but from a micro perspective. What I mean by that is, I'm not so much interested here in whether you're just a open-minded person in general. Like we could say, oh, that person over there is some religious fanatic fundamentalist and he's closed-minded. And this person over here, she's some sort of hippie and she's very open-minded. Well, of course, you can categorize people this way, but let's get beyond that. There's something more important. Let's get into the micro level of open-mindedness and closed-mindedness, because it's not that you're just open-minded on all topics equally. It's that on every specific instance, every situation that your mind comes in contact with, every new idea and belief and worldview, you're going to be either open to it or closed to it. And we want you to be able to notice and to be aware of when your mind is doing what. See, so don't just rest on your laurels and tell yourself, pat yourself on the back and tell yourself how open-minded you are, because even if you're open-minded about some things, I guarantee you there's other things that I could tell you that you will be closed-minded too. And it's recognizing those cases which is going to really start to make a difference in your life. So let's start drawing this distinction with an exercise. This will be the first of several exercises that we do here. It's a simple exercise. You ready? Roll up your sleeves. Try to do this right now. All it requires is that you use your mind. You're just flexing your mind here. So I want you to open your mind to the possibility that your mother hatched from an egg. Can you do that? Do it. Actually do it right now. And notice what it feels like to do it. Open your mind to the possibility that your mother hatched from an egg. I'm not joking. I want you to actually do it. Or if you fail to do it, then notice that. But at least try. So what am I really asking you to do? I'm asking you to let go of the fact that your mother was conventionally birthed. Let go of that, because that's what you have presently believed. Let go of that as though it never even existed in your mind. Throw it away, and now try on this new fact that she hatched from an egg. And try it on seriously, not as a joke. And see how long you can hold that in your mind and carefully observe what your mind is doing as you're holding it. Observe how it feels. Are you open to this possibility? Or are you closed to it? If you're open, notice how openness feels. If you're closed, notice how closedness feels. You're either able to do it or not. And then, of course, there's a question of how long you're able to do it. You might be able to only do it for 3 seconds or 5 seconds. You open your mind to the possibility, and then your mind shuts down and says, oh, well, it's ridiculous. That's crazy. Why am I even doing this? This isn't worth my time. This is just silly armchair philosophy. It's not true. It can't possibly be true. It's ridiculous. Okay, then that's what happened. So I want you to start to notice when your mind gets attached to an idea or a perspective or a belief or a worldview or a position. Just generally speaking. This is one instance of it, but your mind does this all the time with other examples. And I deliberately picked an outlandish example here because I want to separate the content of the example from your ability to be open or closed about it. These are two separate issues. We'll be talking a little bit more about that as we go on here. But I want you to notice what attachment actually feels like, what it feels to be attached to an idea. I want you to notice what resistance to an idea feels like. I want you to notice any excuses or rationalizations that your mind comes up with to opening up to some idea. So what does closedness feel like? You should feel a distinct sort of emotional attachment. There should be a resistance, a sort of righteousness, and a sort of arrogance that comes with sticking to your old position. When the mind is closed, it doesn't even want to consider a new possibility. And that's really all that open-mindedness means, is the willingness to consider a new possibility. And specifically what I'm interested in is the consideration of radical new possibilities. Possibilities that are beyond your conventional culture, social norms, and your paradigms of what's physically possible. See, and that's when the mind really becomes resistant. And as it becomes resistant, it becomes defensive. And as it becomes defensive, it erects all sorts of defense mechanisms. One of which is that it becomes righteous. So if you're not able to open your mind to the possibility that your mother hatched from an egg, you get righteous about it and you say, oh, well, that's just stupid. Leo, you're an idiot for asking me to even consider such a possibility. It can't possibly be true, so it's a waste of my time to even consider it. There's a sort of righteousness and arrogance there. Also, what you notice that it feels dirty. It feels impure. It feels neurotic. You get agitated. You can even get hot. There can be sort of a hot sensation when it comes to opening your mind to a new, potentially threatening possibility. You can feel threatened. You can feel offended. These are all common defense mechanisms. Of course, when you're closed, it feels like an unwillingness to let go. It feels like I have to drag you kicking and screaming towards a new possibility. You don't want to go there willingly. You demand that I drag you there. You demand evidence and proof, and you demand an explanation of why you should go to this new possibility. Another common defense mechanism, which is part of this self-righteousness, is people with a closed mind, they tend to go on the counterattack because, when it comes to the ego mind, the best defense is often a good, strong offense, as they say. And so people who are closed-minded, have you noticed that oftentimes they are the ones that then try to prove themselves or their position or their ideology the most to you? They try to convince you that they're right. So that's very characteristic of closed-mindedness. The mind will want to lecture me, like, Leo, let me tell you why you're wrong, all the ways that you're wrong and why you're asking me to take on this new possibility. Let me tell you why I shouldn't. This sort of attitude. It's an attitude of, I'm right. And that what I have as my old position is just a fact, it's just reality. Like that. So the closed mind tends to become argumentative. It can become obnoxious. It can become emotional, because this is coming from a sort of emotionally charged sense of defensiveness and threat. It becomes easily judgmental. It's often loud-mouthed. It makes a lot of excuses. It justifies, it rationalizes. It can become hostile. It can become violent even when pushed into a corner. It creates distractions. It uses whataboutisms. It loves to blame, and it loves to engage in projection. These are all classic symptoms of a closed mind. So notice, when I ask you to consider that your mother hatched from an egg, first of all, were you able to do it? And if you weren't, did any of these come up for you? If it did, it's okay. You didn't really fail anything. It's just that you got an experiential taste of what closed-mindedness feels like, and that's very important. In fact, in a sense, this is what I want here, because some of you might be so open-minded that you might be able to just do this exercise and ace it. But the problem then is that you don't get an experiential feel for the distinction between a closed and an open mind. And we want you to get that feel. So if this example won't do it for you, there will be others in this episode that might. But you might also need to just pause and come up with your own examples of something, some example of some intellectual position that you're just unwilling to open your mind to, and just to see what that feels like. See what that resistance, that impurity, that neuroticism, what it feels like. It feels, there's something dirty about it. There's something that doesn't feel quite right. You might not be able to pinpoint it or put your finger on it or fully articulate it, but it just doesn't sit quite right with you. That's closed-mindedness. Now, in contrast to that, how does open-mindedness feel? It feels light, calm, cool, easy, chill, free, unattached, relaxed, unafraid, comfortable with letting go of the old position because it has nothing to lose. There's a sort of a sense of freedom of like, oh, sure, I can just jump between different positions. I don't need to cling to my old position. Let me just consider it. There's a sort of a curiosity, an innate curiosity and a desire to explore new possibilities. So when I tell you to consider that your mother hatched from an egg, it could be like, rather than coming up with excuses for why you shouldn't, an open-minded person might go, oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting idea. I've never even thought about that. Let me consider that. And an open-minded person might even go further and might even say, well, that's very interesting because, how do I even know how my mother was born? Did I ask her? Or did I just assume my entire life that she was born like other people? What if she was hatched from an egg and I didn't even ask her and it never even occurred to her to tell me? See, that's how an open-minded person would potentially react to such an exercise. So notice that difference. Open-mindedness, I want you to understand here, very important. Don't get lost in the content of the examples. This is not about the content. This is about the structure. See my prior episode called Content versus Structure, where I explained that distinction. But basically, open-mindedness is a meta skill. It's an ability to feel when you're being closed, and the ability to, it's sort of an awareness. You're aware of it, and then you can let it go rather than being driven by it. See? And this meta skill, it doesn't have anything to do with a particular fact or the truthfulness of a particular statement or belief. Rather, it's a general skill that your mind can develop. Some minds are more closed, others are more open. Those that are more open are able to let go of old positions and explore new ones without getting emotionally attached to them. That's a skill. That's a skill we want to develop, you see. And this skill is independent of what we're considering. We could be talking about religion. We could be talking about science. We could be talking about politics. We could be talking about sexuality or relationships. We could be talking about aliens. We could be talking about conspiracy theories or whatever. And some of those things could be true. Some of those things could be false. But this meta skill, that's the key thing that you need in order to be able to navigate all of these different domains and much more in an effective and truthful manner. Now, of course, many skeptics and so forth and rational people here will say, but Leo, I will only open my mind if you give me sufficient proof. So Leo, I'm all for open-mindedness, but I'm not going to be so open-minded that I'm just going to consider such ridiculous things as my mother hatching from eggs or the earth being flat or some conspiracy theory or something like that. If you're going to make such an extraordinary claim, you need to provide the proof and the evidence, and then I will open my mind. But that's closed-mindedness. That's what I want you to recognize. That position that was just articulated, that's closed-mindedness. See, the key insight here that you're missing is that open-mindedness is independent of and actually prior to proof and truth. See? This is a very common and naive mistake that even many scientifically minded people make, is they think that they should only be willing to open their mind to things that are true. But this puts the cart before the horse and gets the whole situation backwards. Because if you aren't open-minded in the first place, you will never accept the truth because you're not going to give it a fair chance. You will never consider the proof and the evidence. You're not going to accept it because to accept proof and evidence, first, you have to be open-minded. You get that? That's very, very important. Many scientifically minded and rationally minded and atheistically minded and skeptically minded people get this part wrong. So even when we're considering a topic like flat Earth, for example, you might say, well, provide the proof and then I'll open my mind. No, first you open your mind, then we'll see and we'll look at the proof and the evidence and we'll evaluate the situation from an open-minded position. You see, because you're assuming that if I provide you with proof and evidence, that you will just sort of be able to evaluate that evidence and proof fairly, objectively. And if it's true, you'll be able to accept it. But that's not a safe assumption. That, in fact, is not what you're going to be able to do if you're closed-minded. Only an open-minded person is able to do that. But you're closed-minded in this case. So notice that a lot of times science masquerades actually as closed-mindedness. And there are, of course, many, many examples throughout the history and epistemology of science. If we go through the history of science, we see many examples of scientists who behaved in very closed-minded ways which retarded the progress of science. One such example, of course, is when it came to Copernicus and to Galileo and other people in that camp who did groundbreaking research into the motion of the Earth around the sun. It was conventional wisdom 500 years ago that the planet was stationary. Why was it considered stationary? Because all proof and evidence from our direct experience suggests that the planet is stationary. It's not moving. If it was moving, we would feel it. What could be more obvious and simple than that? So, of course, most people's minds were closed to the possibility that the planet was moving, especially at some ridiculous velocity, which is how it moves. So it actually took a very special kind of mind, a very open mind, to be able to see that despite the apparent proof and evidence, that the truth is actually the contrary. It's the opposite. See, it took a genius scientific intellect, and really, back then, it was philosophers who were doing this work. Science hardly existed back then. It was part of philosophy. It's called natural philosophy, basically. And so philosophers, which were the deepest intellectuals in Europe, were sitting around and they were thinking really open-mindedly, at least some of them were, about some of these possibilities. And they opened their minds to the possibility that, wait a minute, what if it's moving at such a velocity that it's so constant that we can't tell the difference? After all, what frame of reference would we use? See, this is now requiring sort of a relativistic conception of reality, not an absolutistic one. And so now we open ourselves to the possibility that maybe it is moving, but we can't tell because we really don't have a good frame of reference. And sure enough, that's exactly how it works. But you see, people in that time would have argued against the motion of the Earth by saying stuff like, well, but if I'm sitting in a carriage and I'm driving down the road, which is how people got around back then, or maybe on a horse, there were no cars, there were no trains back then, and I'm moving, I can tell. It's obvious, I can feel my motion. So if the Earth was moving, I should be able to feel it too. And clearly we don't feel it, so therefore it's not moving. But of course, the problem with that sort of line of reasoning is that, the carriage is not moving at a constant velocity. Now we can go into a plane or into a train or into a car, which is moving relatively constant and isn't accelerating or decelerating, and we don't really notice that it's moving at all. So that was just, that was just a sort of a very simple, naive kind of oversight that could be made based on direct experience. So anyways, the moral of the story, and there are many of these sorts of examples throughout the entire history of science. This is just but one, very classic one. The moral of the story is that first you have to be open-minded, and then there's a possibility for the proof and the evidence to convince you otherwise, to get you to change your position. See, if you're immediately closed-minded to it, what are you assuming? You're assuming that your entire sort of paradigm of reality is correct, but that's precisely what can easily be wrong because you didn't actually spend a lot of deep time developing your metaphysical and epistemic framework of reality. Your worldview wasn't something you sat down and you carefully developed over decades and years of experimentation. You just picked it up from your culture. It's basically just dogma. You assumed it, and you never even thought or considered any alternatives. And now you're just stuck on it, defending it blindly, and therefore, of course, you're closed-minded about it. What I also want you to notice here is that it's possible to be closed-minded and right, and it's possible to be open-minded and wrong. See? For example, you can be closed-minded about flat Earth. You can just completely refuse to even consider flat Earth as a possibility, and you might be right in the end. That might be true. The planet is probably round. And so that instance then gets you to think like, well, okay, so it worked here, so I can just keep doing that. And that turns into a trap. And many scientists especially fall into this trap. They think that as long as they're right, and science is factually right in many instances, that's why science is so valuable, and we appreciate it so much, and we tend to give it so much credibility, is because it has a lot of factual correctness to it. But then we get lulled into sort of a false sense of complacency, thinking that, well, as long as science is always factually right, we can just be closed-minded about it, be dogmatic about science, and therefore we're being scientific, when actually we're not being scientific. We're being dogmatic. It's also possible to be open-minded about something, but then ultimately wrong. For example, you can be open-minded about flat Earth. You can consider it. You can go and research it, and even you can launch yourself into space and actually take a look. Is the Earth round or flat? And you might be wrong. You might think it's going to be flat, and it turns out to be round, and you're wrong. But the open-mindedness really was the important part. So my point here is that being open-minded is more important than being right. Because being right is just one instance of getting something correct, whereas open-mindedness is a much broader attitude and meta skill, which will be applied in many, many instances for the rest of your life. So while, sure, you can get a few things wrong here and there, factual inaccuracies happen even with the best of us. That's not a big deal. You can overcome various kinds of mistakes and inaccuracies as long as you're open-minded. But if you're closed-minded and you get something wrong, you're going to be stuck with it for the rest of your life. See? So that's the more important factor here. People naively assume that they can reach the truth even when their mind is closed. A lot of scientists and materialists and atheists and rationalists and skeptics fall into this trap. This is the trap that these debunkers fall into, is they think that, well, if something is true, then surely it must be so true that no matter how skeptical I am, it will overwhelm my skepticism and it will just prove itself to me beyond a shadow of a doubt. And my role in this process is irrelevant. This is extremely naive and completely ignores the huge factor that psychology plays in discovering truth. The reality is that denial is such a strong psychological force that if you are willing to deny something, if you are willing to deny the truth, you can deny the truth successfully almost in all circumstances. It's shocking how powerful the human mind is at denying truth. You would think that, well, shouldn't there be a certain amount of proof and logic and evidence that will convince anybody? And the answer is absolutely not. If you want to be in denial, you can be in denial for the rest of your life about almost any fact about reality. That's how strong your mind is at denial. And it's only when you appreciate that then you start to see the importance of open-mindedness. Because if you get it stuck in your mind that something isn't true or something is impossible, and that's lodged in there, and then you become a skeptic or a denier or a debunker, or you become rational about it, you start to develop logic that justifies why it's impossible, why it can't be true, then that's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy for you, because your mind will reject and ignore all evidence to the contrary, and no evidence will be able to get through to you. See, proof and evidence requires experimentation and exploration. And these are only possible when you're open and willing to experiment and to explore, which requires open-mindedness. Even something like the fact that the moon exists can easily be denied by a closed-minded person. You would think, well, how is that possible? The moon is up there. You can just look and see the moon in the night sky. There it is, the full moon. It's so obvious. Who could possibly deny it? Aha! But that assumes that the person you're trying to prove it to is open enough to actually be willing to tilt his head up and point his eyes and follow your finger to the moon and actually look at it with his eyes. That's a big assumption. Because if someone is truly closed-minded, you might say, well, there's a moon, and all you have to do is look at my finger. Look, I'm pointing at it up there. There it is. Just look at it. And the person will not do that. And their rationale for not looking at your finger and looking up at the skies, they will say, that's preposterous. There can't possibly be a moon up there, so it would be a waste of my time to even look. And in this way, they're completely trapped and they will never discover the moon. But they're so oblivious to this meta-structural process, to how their own mind is shutting them off from reality, that they think that they're actually being truthful. And they think that they're actually being open-minded. Because in their mind, the way they rationalize it themselves is to say, well, but if there was a moon, surely it must be so obvious that I would know it by now. Why don't I know it if it exists? Surely I wouldn't have to actually tilt my eyes up into the sky to see a moon if a moon existed, right? This is essentially how people think. I mean, it's preposterous in this example. I'm exaggerating, but it's really not that far off. Same sorts of problems were encountered by Galileo when he said that there were moons around Jupiter. His fellow intellectuals and philosophers didn't believe him. He told them, look into this telescope that I invented. Look in the telescope and you'll see the moons. And do you think they looked in that telescope? Of course not. They denied the validity of a telescope. And of course, that still happens to this day. I tell people, go take some psychedelics, you'll discover some truth. And of course, people tell me, oh, but psychedelics is all just a hallucination. Why would I take psychedelics? And they never do. Because they're getting this whole thing backwards. If you want to understand something like psychedelics, you can't understand it from the position you're currently in. First, you have to open your mind. Then you have to realize that, oh, it's a new kind of experience. I have to go experience it. Then I can judge it after the fact. The problem is you're judging it before the fact, which means your mind is closed. See, proof requires experimentation and exploration, which is exactly what your mind doesn't want to do. How can you do the work to prove or verify a thing which you believe is impossible, which your paradigm tells you is impossible, which your metaphysics or your epistemology tells you is impossible? Are you going to be willing to invest time and energy and money and resources into doing that proof? No, of course not. And proof, and here's another thing that many so-called materialists and scientists and rationalists and skeptics don't really understand about the notion of proof, is that proof oftentimes requires a lot of work. Proof doesn't always come easily. Sometimes you got to work for years to prove a thing. Sometimes it costs millions and billions of dollars to prove a thing. So actually, there's very good reason why many things that are true haven't been proven, because proof is hard work. And are you willing to do the work to prove a thing that you think is impossible or highly unlikely? No. And that's exactly how the truth hides from you. Because you're being lazy and you're being closed-minded and you're assuming a bunch of stuff. See, if you know for a fact that God is a man-made myth, you can never test God. If you know for a fact that Christianity is the best, truest religion and Jesus Christ was the highest prophet, you can never test the truth of that. If you know for a fact that reality is a material objective system that exists independent of your mind, you can never test that. So you have to open yourself to alternative possibilities. What if God is not a man-made myth? What if Christianity is not the best? What if Jesus Christ didn't even exist? What if material reality is just something you're imagining? See, if you open your mind to those possibilities, now there's a possibility of you going and testing and maybe finding some proof for it. But keep in mind, that won't necessarily happen easily. Might take years, might take decades, might take a lot of work. It might be difficult, emotionally and in other ways as well. So let's consider some more examples here. We're going to go through maybe a dozen examples in a sort of rapid fire. All I want you to do is I want you to just open your mind to as many of these as possible, if you can. And if you can't, that's okay. Just try to open your mind and notice how it feels to either succeed in opening your mind here or resisting it and closing down. Okay, some of these examples will be easier, some of them will be harder, some of them will be quite outlandish on purpose. All right, so try to do this. And you could always rewind and come back and do this over and over again. So, number one, open your mind to the possibility that Australia is a hoax. By which I mean that if you actually take a plane and fly over Australia to where on the map you would normally suppose there was Australia, it would just be ocean. There would be no land there. You couldn't land. Consider that possibility. And if you're Australian and you live in Australia, well, just pick a different country. Pick Japan or pick Greenland and just consider that they're hoaxes. And that if you flew over those countries, there would be no land there. So, can you do that? Try. Notice any resistance or excuses for why that can't be true. Next example, consider the possibility that Trump is a secret genius and that actually he's highly intelligent, he knows exactly what he's doing, and that all of his bumbling and mumbling and all of his shenanigans that you see on TV, all of it is just an act. And he's just acting that way in order to guide mankind to the next evolution. Some of you Trump supporters, you're already in total agreement with me on that one, right? Well, for you, consider the opposite possibility, that Trump is a total fucking moron, has no idea what he's doing. Open your mind to that possibility. Notice what resistance you have. Open your mind to the possibility that World War II never happened. Open your mind to the possibility that the Egyptian religion was the only true religion on the planet and that all other ones are false. Now, let me just pause here to really explain what I mean by taking this on as a possibility. When you're taking on this Egyptian religion example as a possibility, like you're really opening yourself up to the fact that this is true. That's what I mean. When you actually do this and your mind is capable of doing this, there's a sort of a shift that happens. You used to see the world in this one way, and now you've opened your mind to this alternative possibility. It's almost like an alternative reality or an alternative universe where it's like, whoa, wow, that would be amazing. What if the Egyptian religion was the only true one? Wow. If I seriously consider that for a moment, that feels very different than where I was just a minute ago with my old position. Now, of course, it may not be true, but that's a separate factor. We're not interested in what's true. We're only interested right now in showing you what it feels like to open your mind. You see, that's separate from whether something is true or not. A thing doesn't have to be true for you to open your mind to it. That's the critical distinction that I'm trying to teach you. Open your mind to the possibility that you can become a millionaire. Not as a theory, not as a hypothetical, not as a pipe dream, not by winning the lottery, but actually you. Can you really feel yourself being a millionaire? That's realistic for you, that you can actualize that. Try that. See how that feels. For many people, that's a radical possibility. Can you open your mind to the possibility of attracting a really beautiful girlfriend or boyfriend? For many people, that's a radical possibility. They have all sorts of excuses and reasons for why it's just not possible. But forget all those and just open your mind for the next minute to the possibility that you can do it. How does that feel? Notice whether excuses or resistance comes up. Notice your mind closing down. Open your mind to the possibility that God exists or doesn't exist, whichever is the opposite of what you hold right now. So if you feel that God exists, I want you to open your mind to the possibility that God does not exist. And if you believe that God doesn't exist, open your mind to the possibility that God does exist. Open your mind to the possibility that you're fundamentally mistaken about God. Notice how that feels. Of course, it might be taboo in your culture or in your religion or even in your academic institution to take on this position that I'm asking you to take on. If you're a respectable scientist working in some major university, taking on the idea that God might exist might be threatening to your career. It might be very taboo in that subculture. Notice that. Of course, if you're Islamic, taking on the idea that Allah doesn't exist, that's also very taboo. But do it anyways. Drop the fear and just open your mind to the possibility. See? Next, open your mind to the possibility that UFOs are real and that they are flying around out there and that they're actually inhabited by aliens. There's aliens in those crafts. Open your mind to the possibility that science and atheism are fundamentally wrong about reality. You see, closed-mindedness is not just a problem of religious fanatics. We all know religious fanatics are closed-minded. What else is new? Well, what else is new? What's more news to people is discovering that actually scientists and atheists are very dogmatic and closed-minded as well. There's a lot of things that science is not willing to open its mind to, which actually inhibits science's ability to do new high-quality science. Because fundamentally, science is not about taking one position. Science is about the exploration of reality and discovering whatever possibilities are out there. But you can only explore those possibilities seriously if you're open to them. And there's a long history of ignorant, closed-minded scientists who resisted exploring new aspects of reality and therefore they held back science. It took some new scientists to come along to challenge conventions and to really question, to really be open-minded, to make the new breakthroughs. Open your mind to the possibility that evil does not exist at all. That it's just a fabrication of your mind. That means that the most evil thing you can imagine that it's not actually evil. Open your mind to that possibility. Next, open your mind to the possibility that your memories are imaginary. That means your memory of childhood, all that time you spent with your mother and your father and your brother and your sister and whatever, that all of those are just imaginary. You're just hallucinating those. They didn't actually happen. Can you open your mind to that? Now open your mind to the possibility that your country is evil. Whatever country you're from, whatever country you love. What if your country is actually the most evil country on the planet? Open your mind now to that possibility. How does that feel? There might be some resistance to that one. Next, open your mind to the possibility that you will get reincarnated after your death as a rapist. Consider that possibility. Can you just sit with that without resisting it? Open your mind to the possibility that Hitler was actually a force for good in the world. Consider that possibility. Seriously consider it. Like, what if that was actually true? What would that mean? You see here, part of the challenge with this open-mindedness business is that sometimes to be open-minded to such a significant possibility, what it does, it makes you have to reevaluate your entire scheme of the world. Because here you are, you grew up thinking that Hitler was the evil one, and he started World War II for all sorts of selfish reasons, and then he was defeated, and all of that was good, and good prevailed over evil, blah, 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 blah. You believed all these stories, and now all of a sudden you discover, or you just even open your mind to the possibility that Hitler was actually a force of good in the world, and now, whoa, it's like, wait a minute, if that's true, that means all the other stuff I thought was true is wrong or somehow mistaken. I got to go back and figure that out. What is really going on there? I got to think through my history, think through my schooling, got to question society, question culture, question a lot of stuff. And see, that's exactly what you probably don't want to do, which is why you just find it much easier to close off the possibility that Hitler was actually a force for good in the world. Of course, I'm not saying this is true. All I care about is opening your mind to this possibility. Next, imagine the possibility that Jesus Christ never existed, that he was just a fictional character that was invented by other people. Whoa, does that change your perspective on things? Does that change your perspective on spirituality, on Christianity, on enlightenment, on awakening? Next, consider the possibility that the Buddha was not fully enlightened. Oh, that's not possible. But how do you know? How do you know? Did you meet the Buddha? Are you yourself fully enlightened? How do you know what full enlightenment even is? You just assumed, didn't you? Isn't that all you did, is you just assumed the Buddha was fully enlightened? Now, I'm not here saying he was or he wasn't. I'm just interested in opening your mind to this possibility. So those are our list of examples. Of course, you can keep doing this exercise forever. You can find thousands of such examples, and I recommend you play around with this a bit more on your own. But I just want you to notice for now with these examples, notice what openness feels like, notice what closedness feels like, and draw that experiential distinction between the two. Truth is not the issue here. The issue here is resistance and denial. The issue is how your mind distorts reality based upon its preconceived prejudices and biases and what it needs to be true. See, when your mind needs something to be true, it will fudge the facts and skew them and distort them to create the picture that you need to be true. That's what scientists, rationalists, atheists, and materialists and skeptics don't really understand. That's also, of course, what religious people don't understand. That's what New Age people and many spiritual people don't understand. They don't understand the power of the mind to distort perception to create precisely the sort of image or scenario or worldview that you want. You'd have to be very unbiased and objective in order to avoid those distortions. See my episode called Self-Bias for more about that topic. It's important that when you're opening your mind to these new possibilities, that you really take the possibilities as serious, not just merely as mental masturbation or armchair philosophy, but like actually consider it. Now, of course, the common objection that comes up here is, but Leo, open-mindedness, this is so dangerous because you're asking me to believe in all this crazy stuff, and then what am I going to do? I'm going to become a flat earther? I'm going to become some kind of cult follower? I'm going to turn into a religious fanatic or some new ager or some loose-minded person? But actually, these people are closed-minded. They're not open-minded people. A flat earther is not an open-minded person. He's a closed-minded person. A cult follower is not an open-minded person, a closed-minded person. Think of examples from history of closed-minded people. Flat earthers, religious fundamentalists, cult leaders, racists, white supremacists, bigots, homophobes, transphobes, nationalists, Nazis, Hitler, the Spanish Inquisition, those who killed Jesus, anti-vaxxers, climate change deniers, conspiracy theorists, libertarians, right-wingers, red pillars, all sorts of bad scientists, ignorant parents, terrorists. These were not open-minded people. These are closed-minded people. Do you want to be like these people? Or do you want to be open-minded? Open-mindedness, this is the mistake people make, is they think that open-mindedness means that now I'm going to start believing in stupid things. No. Believing in stupid things is closed-mindedness. See? If you're open-minded, you don't need to believe in anything very strongly because you're willing to just explore the entire intellectual landscape in a detached fashion, coolly, without much bias or prejudice. You're willing to explore stuff. And then what happens is that the truth can hit you. Whereas if you lack closed-mindedness, what happens is that you find the first one or two beliefs or worldviews that you resonate with, you latch onto them, you start to believe in them, you close your mind around them, and then that's it. You're stuck for the rest of your life. And the truth is never able to hit you. Open-mindedness really is it means mental flexibility. It means detachment and intellectual fearlessness. Closed-mindedness is generated by fear, attachment, the desire for power, survival, and the ego mind. Closed-mindedness comes from a certain agenda that your mind has, whereas open-mindedness is free of agenda. You're just willing to explore reality without needing it to be any particular way. And it's really only through that process that you'll ever arrive at truth. Notice that the mind has an inertia to it. It accretes over time like a snowball rolling down a hill. It adds more and more mass. It becomes bigger, and it develops a sort of momentum of its own. And then what happens is that once the mind is sufficiently big enough, it struggles to change itself. It's very difficult for the mind to then change itself fundamentally. The mind can make changes on the periphery of the snowball, but the very core of the snowball is so densely packed and it's so integral to the structure of the snowball that it's very difficult to penetrate through to it and to change the insides of it. I suggest that this is what has happened with your mind. It took the first 20 years of your life or so to build up this snowball, which was built up in a certain culture that you grew up in. It was really just an accretion of cultural beliefs and opinions and assumptions. You accreted all of those, and then that formed the core of your mind. And then from age 20 onwards, you're basically living your life rolling downhill, this massive inertia. And now, when it comes to really using your mind to be able to explore reality, you can't do it because the mind struggles to change itself. Think of open-mindedness as the mind's willingness to change itself. The mind's willingness to explore new ways that it could be, that it could see the world. A closed mind doesn't want to explore new ways to change itself. It doesn't want to see the world in new ways. It's focused rather on entrenching and defending its existing ways of seeing the world, because your life has actually been built upon the ways in which you see the world. You see, for example, your career or your marriage or your relationship with your children or your relationship to business or to politics or to science or to your religion or to your church. All of these relationships, these are real world relations. This is not philosophy. Now, we're talking about real world relationships and situations that you have upon which hinge your ability to earn money, to have sex, to have positive emotions, to have friends, and so forth. All of these things hinge upon your worldview. You see? So when we're talking about changing worldviews, we're not just talking about armchair philosophy, like we're sitting somewhere having a purely hypothetical discussion about something. No. We mean that if we change your worldviews sufficiently enough, we're going to change all those very real, tangible aspects of your life. You might no longer be able to live in the same country anymore. You may no longer be able to live in the same house with the same people. You may no longer be able to be married to the same spouse that you used to be, because now your worldview has changed so much that you couldn't live with yourself to live with the same people in the same country, in the same house, going to the same job, doing the same things that you did. See? So of course people are very resistant to changing their worldviews, because they fear what this new worldview, what kind of repercussions it would have for their real life. And they're attached to their real life. You're attached to your friends, to your spouse, to your children, to your job, to your house, to your country, to your religion, to all this stuff. And of course, changing all that stuff is uncomfortable, and changing your mind is uncomfortable. Admitting you're wrong is uncomfortable. Admitting that you've wasted 10 or 20 years of your life going to church, praying to some false god, that's uncomfortable. Admitting that you've invested 20 years into science, studying some sort of scientific field which is fundamentally flawed, based upon flawed metaphysical or epistemic assumptions, that's very painful and uncomfortable. And you don't know where that will place you in the future. You don't know. You're going to have to quit your job, and then what? What are you going to do? You don't know. How are you going to support your family? How are you going to feed your kids? You don't know. So you see, all of this seems like just philosophy, but it's actually much, much more serious. It's intimately tied with your survival. See my critical 2-part series called Understanding Survival, where we talk about that. So fundamentally, open-mindedness is about the flexibility and freedom of your mind. How free is your mind? On a scale of 1 to 10, how rigid or flexible is your mind? And I want you to contemplate, this is a bit of a homework assignment, is what are the problems that arise from having a rigid mind? See how many problems in society you can trace back to having a rigid mind. How many problems within politics, within religion, within science, within business? How many personal problems can you trace back to having a rigid mind? Problems in your relationships, emotional problems, problems with money, problems with your career, problems with your weight loss, whatever. How many of those ultimately root themselves in having a rigid mind? You'll see that most of them do. Then that gets you to now appreciate the importance of flexibility of mind, which now gets you to see the importance of radical open-mindedness. Notice what it feels like to jump and explore between different points of view and perspectives without believing in any particular one. This is a meta ability. It's a rare ability that few human beings cultivate. It's not really taught well in school or in church or in business. Usually, our society teaches us some one preferred point of view, one preferred philosophy, one preferred ideology, whether that be in business, at school, at work, whatever. Because usually exploring different points of view, this takes time. It doesn't give you immediate payoff. It's not immediately profitable. For example, if you want to become enlightened, the fastest path could be to just go and pick one school of thought about enlightenment, one spiritual school, and just do everything they tell you to do. And don't consider any other school or any other teaching. Just pick one teacher, one guru, stick to him, and there you go. And that's what most people do. But of course, you see the problem with this is that what if you pick the wrong one? How would you know? After all, how would you know you've picked the right one? Because the only way, honestly, you could know if you picked the right one is if you've explored them all. Then you're in a position where you can evaluate them, you can contrast, compare them, and then you can pick the right one. It's sort of like shopping for a vacuum cleaner. How do you know you got the best deal? Only if you shopped around at many stores, then you can have a sense of the fact that you got the best deal. But if you are just going to go and buy only one vacuum cleaner, the first one that you see, that you lay your eyes on, chances are pretty good you might get fleeced. See? And that's exactly how people get themselves into religious and spiritual cults, is that they just assume that, well, this guru's the right one, this religion's the right one. They just go full in on all in on that. They don't consider any other alternatives, and then they end up getting themselves screwed. And this even happens when you pick a relatively good enlightened teacher. You could pick some enlightened teacher and follow him completely, but the problem will still be that any limitations or weaknesses or biases that enlightened teacher has, they will transfer and rub off onto you because you're not thinking for yourself. You're just blindly following him. This is the problem that I have with people who just blindly follow the Buddha or blindly follow Christ or blindly follow Muji or Rupert Spira or Eckhart Tolle. It's not that Eckhart Tolle or Rupert Spira are bad teachers or bad people. They're not. But if you think that they're going to give you the full scope of what spiritual work is, you're in for a rude awakening. They won't. They're going to give you a partial picture. And if you're not willing to explore, if you're not intellectually curious and open-minded enough to consider possibilities like, well, maybe Rupert Spira is not at the highest level of realization. I mean, maybe he is, but maybe he isn't. But if you're not open to that possibility, you're stuck. You see? And there's no way you could know unless you go around and you explore and you try different things. But when you do that, there's a cost to that. The cost is time, energy, and confusion. It's confusing to consider many different points of view. You don't get that immediate sense of certainty and resolution, because if you just go devote yourself to one guru and you just say, okay, that's my guru and I'm just going to do everything he says and just he's the most enlightened one and that's it, and there's nothing I'm going to miss by being fully devoted to him. That's going to take me all the way to the highest awakening. If that's what you believe from the very get-go, first of all, notice that's just a belief. It's just an assumption. There's no proof for that. You didn't actually derive that through experimentation and exploration. You just assumed it. Why did you assume it? Because it's a very convenient assumption. You need to do a lot less work now. You can just blindly follow that person like a sheep, and then you won't even know what you've missed because you've closed yourself off to other possibilities. So jumping around between different points of view is a meta ability. It's a rare ability, and it's something that closed-minded people are fundamentally incapable of. They're incapable of switching points of view on a dime. If they could do that, they would be radically open-minded people. And it can be confusing and disorienting to rapidly change points of view, because the points of view, they all clash and contradict each other, and then you don't know who's right. Which point of view is superior to which one? Should I be using this point of view as the highest one or that one? You don't know. And who do you ask? Can you go and ask some guru to tell you which point of view is the best one? Well, no, because if you ask some guru, that assumes that you take on his point of view as the absolute one. So see, you're sort of left in this sea of confusion and relativity. And then most people don't like that because the mind loves certainty. The mind wants a sense of direction, something tangible that it can bite onto. And so that's usually what it does, is it doesn't want to be swimming in this sea of uncertainty. So it just picks a thing, sticks to it, and then convinces itself that that's the right course. And I'm not saying you can't get results that way. You can get results. If you're lucky and you happen to choose the right person, the right guru, the right school, maybe you will go all the way to full awakening or whatever. Maybe you'll earn billions of dollars if you choose the right business guru. Maybe you will have sex with hundreds of women if you choose the right dating coach or whatever. But also, you could choose some cult leader who will guide you towards something very harmful. And how will you know who's the cult leader and who's not? Only through the experience gained through exploring different points of view and being open-minded. If you happen to be a rather open-minded person by default, which you probably are if you're following my content, then be careful with the following mistake. This is a great mistake that open-minded people make. This is a mistake that I've made in my life because I tend to be rather open-minded by default, is that as an open-minded person, you tend to assume that other people are as open-minded as you are. And you tend to assume that, well, if it's easy for you to think relativistically and jump between different points of view, that other people can do it too. And that's the mistake. No, they can't. The majority of mankind is at such a level of cognitive development that they are incapable of jumping between different points of view the way that you and I can. That doesn't mean they're evil people. It just is what it is. And even if you are open-minded, you can still appreciate that there are other aspects of life that you're not open-minded about. Like, you could be open-minded within the realm of spirituality, but then you're going to be closed-minded within some other sphere. You see, like I said, you have to really look at it on a case-by-case basis. Get really micro with it. One of the things I want you to take away from this episode is I want you to start to feel and to notice in every instance where your mind is being closed. You have to develop that feeling ability by going through these exercises, by self-reflecting, by doing some meditation, whatever, some kind of mindfulness work. It's especially helpful when you're in a kind of an ideological debate or an argument with somebody, a friend, a family member, somebody on some online forum, whatever. You're in some ideological debate. It's really important to notice when you get wrapped up emotionally in that debate and you start to defend your position, and then you start to notice how it feels kind of dirty. Your mind is kind of closing down and you're just trying to defend that position, even though now you can almost tell there's a deeper layer of your mind which kind of knows that you're being ideological and you're going too far and you're pushing your position too much. You're not really hearing the other side. You're not really considering the other point of view, but you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. You've been there. We've all been there. Even the best and most open-minded of us have been there. And it's in those moments that I want you to awaken and to realize, oh, this is what I'm doing. This is that closed-mindedness stuff that Leo was talking about. I'm being defensive. I'm going on the counterattack. I'm being argumentative. Why am I doing that? And then get curious about that and explore deeper. That is what you got to, that's the work that you do to become open-minded. I did a lot of that work when I was a teenager, when I was doing philosophy just by myself. And that's ultimately what allowed me to get to the point where I'm at today, is doing that work. Most people cannot switch points of view easily, in the same way that most people simply can't juggle. They didn't learn how. They never practiced it. Nobody taught them. This stuff is generally not taught in school. Why does the mind tend to get closed? Because you have something to lose in letting go of a belief or a point of view. Your beliefs and points of views are not just frivolous things. They are intimately tied with your survival. So to let go of a belief or a point of view usually means a threat to your survival. And of course, when you feel threatened, you get scared. And when you're scared, you get defensive. And then by that point, truth has completely flown out the window. Now you're not really following the truth. Now you're just defending some bias you have because you need it to turn out some particular way, because that's what you need in order to keep feeding your family, or to keep maintaining your friends, or to sustain your marriage, or whatever. See, once the mind constructs an identity out of a belief or a worldview, then the mind becomes closed about it. Because anything you create an identity out of, anything you attach yourself to, it feels like it's you. So if you take a fundamentalist Christian or Muslim and you ask them to stop believing in their prophet and in their holy book, they can't do it. They literally can't do it, because it's such a huge part of their identity, because it's been so brainwashed into them. It's such a huge part of their identity. Losing it feels like losing a part of themselves. And so, of course, their mind becomes closed to it. And again, this is not exclusive to just religious fanatics. This is also true of scientists. Take a scientist like, I don't know, Neil deGrasse Tyson, or Sean Carroll, or Richard Dawkins. Take one of these scientists and you'll see that they suffer from the exact same problem, because they've created an identity out of science. Especially this guy, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's created such a huge identity and career out of science that his identity, his career, his life, his family, his ability to feed his children, if he has them, I don't know, probably he does, I assume. All of them are, this is all so intertwined. His celebrity, his fame, his status, his money, his sex, all of it is intertwined so much with this, you see. It's such an incestuous relationship that he can't seriously question science, because if he ever seriously questioned science, his whole world would crumble. He would have an existential crisis. He would find himself sitting in a dark corner in his room with a revolver playing Russian roulette, because he would have such an existential crisis. You see, how are you that way in your life? So Neil deGrasse Tyson's mind is closed to certain things. Now, generally, he's open-minded about many things, but he's also closed-minded to many things. Higher things. We might say mystical things, non-dual things. So his mind is closed because the enemy of the great is the good. When you have a good worldview, it's hard to drop it for a better worldview, for an awesome worldview, for an infinite worldview, for something beyond worldview entirely. See, because your life hinges on it. The mind's job, remember, is to construct reality. The mind doesn't just think about reality. The mind is actively engaged in the process of constructing reality. So one of the reasons that it gets so rigid is in order to fulfill its function of construction. In order for the mind to construct reality effectively, it has to construct reality and then deny that it constructed reality. Why does it have to deny it? Because if it admits that it constructed the reality, then what it calls reality doesn't really feel like reality anymore. It feels like an illusion. It feels like a fabrication. See, science, a scientist doesn't want to admit that he's fabricating science. He wants to say that, no, Leo, I didn't fabricate gravity. Gravity is something that's out in the world. I just discovered it. I'm just reporting facts. That's not what's actually happening. You are fabricating gravity in such profound ways you don't even comprehend how you're doing it. But that's precisely the function of the mind, is to do it, but not know how it's doing it. Thereby, you get reality. If you knew how you were doing it, it wouldn't be reality anymore. It would be what? It would be your creation. If you knew how you constructed all of this, everything, if you knew how you created time, space, people, animals, planets, stars, galaxies, universes, history, future, technology, atoms, molecules, viruses, if you knew all that, reality would not look like reality to you anymore. So you're playing games, constructing reality while denying that you're doing so. Because it's a lot of responsibility to accept that you're creating reality. That means you're creating your own suffering, you're creating your own victim mindset, you're creating your own hatred, your own negative emotions, your own depression, your own sadness, your own incapability. You're creating all of that. That's a lot to accept. You don't want to accept it. So you deny that you're doing it. And honestly, you're not conscious of how you're doing it. So it's not just that you're lying, you're lacking in consciousness too. First and foremost, you're lacking in consciousness. So in a certain sense, you're innocent. But basically, fear of letting go of mental positions creates a paradigm lock. I've talked about paradigm lock. See my older episode called How Paradigms Work, I believe it's called. Important one. I talk about the concept of paradigm lock. Paradigm lock basically just means that you have a certain paradigm or a certain entire worldview or system of how you see the world. And then every worldview has a sort of a locking mechanism that locks you into that worldview. The worldview itself, think of the worldview itself as almost like a survival organism. For it to survive, it has to lock itself in and maintain its survival. The way it does that is sort of by infecting your mind and then instilling you with fear that if you leave this worldview, that something bad is going to happen to you. This is actually a classic tactic that cult leaders use, is that they will program new members into the cult. They will use mind control techniques to instill deep fear of how terrible their life will be if they leave the cult. And in this way, they're able to sort of blackmail and hold cult members hostage, because they've spent months programming them with ideas like, well, if you leave this cult, then you're going to lose your family, you're going to lose your spouse, you're going to lose opportunities for sex, you're going to lose your income, you're going to lose everybody who loves you, you're going to lose all your friends, you're going to lose everything, basically. Your whole life will be so bad that you'll want to kill yourself. And then, of course, how can you leave once your mind has been programmed with all that fear? And that's the same sort of dynamic. By the way, see my 2-part series called Cult Psychology, which is really profound, goes into a lot of these sneaky tactics that cults use. And also part 2 talks about how it applies to more generally to outside of traditional cults and into more mainstream society. Because cult psychology is not limited to only cults, which is sort of a perfect segue here, because see, every worldview, in a sense, uses some form of sneaky cult psychology to hold you hostage to it. For example, if you're born in an Islamic country, you're going to be programmed with the Islamic worldview, the Islamic paradigm, and you know, part of that paradigm is the fear of going to hell if you ever question the paradigm, or if you ever dare to question Allah, or if you ever dare to question Muhammad, or if you ever dare to leave Islam. See, every worldview tries to, not every, there are exceptions. There are some worldviews that are better than others, so I don't want to paint too broad of a brush here, but most worldviews, what they do is they have a locking mechanism that locks you in with fear, that closes your mind down. Religion is guilty of this, but science is also guilty of this. Logic is guilty of this. The mainstream culture is guilty of this. Capitalism is guilty of this. Even the notion of sanity is guilty of this. See, what you consider sanity is actually a worldview, a sort of a paradigm that you're locked into, and to venture outside of the norms of what you would consider sane and others around you in your culture consider sane, that scares you, it terrifies you. What would your family think of you if you went beyond the boundary of sanity? What would you think of yourself if you went beyond the boundary of sanity? See, you're going to be afraid, and that locks you into whatever paradigm you call sanity. But what is sanity? Sanity is whatever culture tells you it is. So, in order to really free your mind and to be able to go to the deepest levels of understanding, you have to be able to bust through these paradigm locks, which first means you have to be able to recognize their structure, see them, become aware enough of them. Then you have to be willing to jump between different paradigms, not get attached to any one of them, and you have to be willing to call the bluff of the paradigm. See, the paradigm's bluff is that it's telling you that, hey, if you leave Islam, you're gonna suffer in hell. If you question science, then you're going to become some sort of fringe lunatic and you're going to lose your professorship. If you question logic, you're going to become some illogical nutcase conspiracy theorist. If you question sanity, you're going to end up in a mental asylum. If you question capitalism, you're going to become some sort of communist, radical. And if you question mainstream culture, then you're going to become some weirdo and nobody's going to marry you or want to be friends with you, whatever. Fear. And you have to say, oh yeah, I call your fucking bluff. I call your bluff. Show me what you got. Let me challenge religion. Let me challenge science. Let me challenge logic. Let me challenge the mainstream. Let me challenge capitalism. Let me challenge sanity. And let me see where it leads me. And that comes with open-mindedness. And how many people are willing to do that? Very, very few. See, your mind is playing a self-deception game. See my 3-part series called Self-Deception, where I outline many self-deception mechanisms, of which this topic here is one. The game that your mind is playing is that it tells itself that your mind is open and open to proof and evidence when it really isn't. Your mind is only open to proof and evidence on your terms. You see, here's one of the things that people don't understand about closed-mindedness. When you are closed-minded, it's not that you're closed-minded and telling yourself that you're closed-minded. You're lying to yourself about it. So if you ask some Christian fundamentalist, hey, are you closed-minded? Is he going to tell you yes? Of course not. He's going to tell you no. No, I'm a totally open-minded person. I'm very reasonable. I'm very logical. I'm very evidence-based. That's what any ideological fundamentalist will tell you. Ask a capitalist, are you open-minded? Of course I am. Ask a Islamic rabbi or Islamic imam, are you open-minded? He'll say, of course I am. But what he really means is, yes, he's open-minded on his terms, on the terms of his paradigm. So he's open to evidence and proof so long as it completely validates his existing paradigm. Yes, in that sense, he's open-minded. But that's not real open-mindedness, of course. That's a perversion. That's closed-mindedness. Because to be truly open-minded means you're willing to question your paradigm. You're willing to consider proof and evidence which is outside of what you would even consider valid proof and valid evidence. Because after all, what is valid proof? What is valid evidence? Where did you get these notions? Are these notions that were handed down to mankind by God as to what constitutes valid proof? No, these are highly relative, subjective, and contentious notions. What's valid evidence and proof to one person isn't to another. That's the whole problem. So how do we adjudicate this problem? How do we know whose standards of proof and evidence are the right ones? This is a very deep epistemic problem. I've talked about it in the past in my episodes about epistemology. I don't recall all their titles at this point. You have to go back and search through my catalog, but they're there. This is a very deep epistemic problem. So whatever paradigm you adopt, your paradigm is shaping the fundamental criteria of what you consider valid and invalid proof and evidence and legitimate and illegitimate, right and wrong, and good and bad, and sane and insane, and so forth. See, the paradigm is reinforcing itself. It's sort of like a vortex spinning inside of a medium, like a tornado or like a whirlpool in your shower, in your bathtub. See, and you're kind of like a little particle stuck in that whirlpool. And your job is to break free of it, because that's not the only whirlpool. There's many whirlpools in this giant sea, this ocean of consciousness, many whirlpools, and you're just stuck in one of them. And the only way you're going to break out of a whirlpool is by being open-minded and curious enough to go explore others. And the more of them you explore, the more it's going to open your mind more and more and more and more. And you're going to see that, oh man, I thought I had everything figured out when I was in this whirlpool, and then I went into this other whirlpool and it was bigger and grander and more interesting, and now I have two to compare. And then I went to a third one and it was even different, and fourth, a fifth, a sixth, and each one opens you more and more and more. See, so what you really need to be open-minded to is not making surface level changes to your paradigm, but fundamentally reevaluating the core of your paradigm, which is exactly what most people are closed-minded to. So the self-deception game that your mind is playing is that it's pretending as though it's open, but it's only open on the surface. It's open to surface level change. It's not open to structural change. It's not open to really questioning the paradigm. So be careful when your mind tells you that you're an open-minded person. Consider the possibility that maybe you're lying to yourself. After all, it's very convenient to tell yourself you're an open-minded person, because, hey, if I adopt the identity that I'm an open-minded person, and I become very closed-minded about the fact that I'm an open-minded person and I believe I'm very open-minded, but actually I'm just a fundamentalist Christian, or I'm just a materialist scientist, or I'm just a capitalist, or I'm whatever, but I fancy myself open-minded, that's extremely convenient, because That's part of my paradigm now, is that I'm open-minded and that my paradigm is actually very open. Like science loves to fool itself to think that, oh, science is totally open. Leo, science is open to all evidence and all proof. If it's true, science will adopt it and accept it and love it. No, it won't. That's an extremely convenient feature of that paradigm, which lets it get away with actually being closed. Because when you tell yourself that you're so open, that means that when you're actually going to close something off, you have to deny it completely in your mind. You have to actually shut it out of your awareness. And so that becomes a super convenient feature of a paradigm to just completely block out all other possibilities. The paradigm, basically, it's almost like a parasite in your mind, and then it becomes monopolistic. It tries to monopolize your entire mind. So the problem with something like Christianity or Islam is not merely that it's a mind virus. It's a monopolistic mind virus that just completely overtakes everything. It's like a cancer in your mind. Same thing with something like libertarianism or with right-wing ideologies. Also, some left-wing ideologies as well, like Marxism. Sometimes it just completely monopolizes a person's mind to the point where they can't see anything but through a Marxist lens, or they can't see anything but through a libertarian lens, or through a Christian lens, or through an Islamic lens, or through a materialist scientific lens, or through a skeptic lens, or through a rational lens. And none of that will get you to the deepest understandings of reality. All of that is limited because fundamentally why you're monopolizing this and why you're clinging to all this stuff is because it's coming from selfishness. It's coming from limited consciousness. It's coming from attachment and from bias. Closed-mindedness is fundamentally a weakness. It's fear. And open-mindedness is fundamentally a strength. It's love. And these are two opposite forces that are at work in your life. In many different domains and spheres, this is just one of them. This is in the intellectual sphere. Now, we're talking about fear and love in the sphere of exploring one's intellect, in the operation of the mind. What is the connection between closed-mindedness and self-bias? Well, closed-mindedness is there to defend self-bias. It's because you have biases, and by the way, see my episode called Self-Bias, where I explain that the reason you have self-bias is because you have a survival agenda, because you're a living organism, you need to survive as a finite thing, as whatever you believe that you are that needs to be survived and defended. So your self-biases, of course, they're all false. They're all biases. Truth is completely unbiased. So you're sort of operating from a position of bias and falsehood, and therefore your mind needs to close off to defend those self-biases from what? From an assault from the outside by truth. Closed-mindedness is like the moat around the castle that is built to protect the castle from getting assaulted from forces from the outside. Otherwise, the castle would be destroyed. And you might say, oh, well, that's terrible. Why would I want my castle destroyed? Well, but what if you're very confined, living in a tiny little limited castle, and there's a giant, vast kingdom and world for you to explore out there? Jungles and deserts and forests and mountains and all of this, but you're living just on this little island surrounded by a moat in this tiny little one-bedroom castle. And that's your whole life. And you only look outside the windows of your castle, and what you see there is you take that for what the world is, but there's so much beyond that you haven't seen because you're afraid to leave your castle. So in this case, actually letting down the drawbridges and dismantling the moat to let the forces from outside, attack you and destroy your castle. It seems like it's a terrible thing, but actually it's a good thing. Let your science get crumbled. Let your Christianity and your Islam get crumbled. Let your capitalist philosophies get crumbled and your libertarian ones get crumbled, because that's not the truth. That's not ultimate understanding. See, all worldviews are self-biased, and they all serve some survival function. And because you don't want to admit that, because you want to keep being self-biased, you want to keep being selfish, that's why you close your mind. Because if you opened your mind, you would at some point have to admit, oh my God, my worldview is so selfish. It's so fucking selfish. I have to relinquish it. I can't live this way anymore with all these biases. So the only way your self-biases can survive is when you ignore them and you sweep them under the rug and you are unconscious about them. And the way you do that is through the mechanism of closed-mindedness. Now, a common refrain that I hear is people say, oh, Leo, all this open-mindedness is good, but you're taking it too far. After all, we should be open-minded, but we don't want to be so open-minded that our brains fall out, right? That's precisely wrong. It sounds cute when you say it. It sounds nice, like, oh yeah, be open-minded, but not so open-minded your brains fall out. But actually, this is, again, what is this but fear? It's fear. It's fear. That's what that is. You want to be so open-minded that eventually you realize you don't even have a brain. Your brain is a hallucination. Try to get to that point. Become so open-minded that it kills you one day. Try to get to that point. Become so open-minded you have nothing left to defend intellectually. People don't realize that attachment to ideas, beliefs, and worldviews is one of the greatest illusions and one of the most strongest forces in society and in life. You think people get attached to their cars and their material possessions and people and things and children and money? Of course they do. But even more so, they get attached to ideas, beliefs, and worldviews. And it's really, really hard to let those go. It's one of the ultimate illusions of life because it's so central to how we construct our realities. See, you can lose a child. You can lose $1 million. You can lose a car. You can lose a house. You can lose some material possession. You can lose a spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend. You can lose these things, and it'll hurt you. It might even change you in some way, transform you a little bit, grow you, but it's not going to like really shake the foundations of what you consider reality. But that's not the case with beliefs, ideas, and worldviews. There are certain beliefs, ideas, and worldviews that you can question so deeply and let go of so fully that it will literally change physical reality. Like, I'm not kidding. It's possible that you become so open-minded that you realize you don't have a brain. Open your mind to that possibility. So closed-mindedness is one of the top self-deception mechanisms. So this episode here will pair very nicely as a follow-up to my 3-part series on self-deception. Go check that one out. Because this is all, you have to understand that this whole topic is all within the context of self-deception. Everything we're talking about here, to really unravel what life is and how it works, self-deception is the key. Understanding self-deception, your own self-deception, is the key. Because you're constantly being deceived by yourself. Because that's what needs to happen for you to construct a reality. Here's another key insight that you should remember, is that the truth requires no defending. The more truthful you are, the less defensive you are. When you are really deeply conscious of the truth, all your defenses drop away. All desire to argue drops away. All desire to prove others wrong drops away. All desire to be right drops away. It's not needed because you're so deeply grounded in the truth that you know the truth is completely unshakable. And because it's eternal and it's completely unshakable, it's completely unquestionable, it's completely absolute, it needs no defending, because nothing can touch it. Now, the ego mind compensates for not having access to this absolute truth by being defensive, arrogant, strident, obnoxious, critical, ideological, and overly confident. It's a sort of a facade of confidence, this sort of macho facade of I'm right, I have the truth, when really all that just reveals is that you don't have the truth. Because if you really had the truth, you wouldn't need to put on an act of how much truth you have. See? You would just silently bask in the truth. You wouldn't need to convince anybody of it. You wouldn't need to go on some crusade or on some jihad. Now, you might still be wondering, but Leo, can open-mindedness go too far? What happens if I become so open-minded and then I go down the rabbit hole, start believing all sorts of fringe theories, and then just waste a bunch of my time and so on? Well, here's the thing. Open-mindedness has to be tempered by being grounded in direct experience and also by being honest when you truly don't know something. So the difference between what I'm telling you here and something like a flat earther philosophy or some conspiracy theory that's like Alex Jones style stuff or David Icke or whatever, the difference between what I'm telling you and that is that yes, you're open-minded, but also you're honest with yourself about what is actually truly in your direct experience. So somebody tells you that there's reptilian overlords who are conspiring to dominate mankind and all of this. Okay, but are you conscious of these reptilian overlords? Are they in your direct experience? If not, then you have to be honest about that, and then you have to say to yourself, I don't know. I don't know if there are reptilian overlords. And then this is what now grounds you, and it keeps you from floating off into all sorts of fantasy that is possible if you're open-minded, but then you're not paying close attention to direct experience. Then you can veer off into fantasy, and you can start believing into ghosts and UFOs and this and that and all sorts of crazy stuff. And then you get lost in that. That becomes a distraction in and of itself. And conspiracy theories are very toxic and very cancerous and problematic. I'll probably cover that in a separate episode in the future. So yeah, you do have to be careful. Open-mindedness is not a license for wishful thinking and wild speculation. It's not a license for just guesswork, where it's like, well, I think that there's some crazy shit happening over there. I haven't seen it, I haven't experienced it, I haven't verified any of it, but I just all believe in it. It's like, no, that's fantasy. That's not your direct experience. So you do have to be very ruthless with keeping yourself grounded in direct experience, but also open, because your direct experience can change significantly. So you have to be open to that. Open-mindedness is also not a license for us versus them, fear-based conspiracy theories. I see and hear a lot of these lately, where there's some secret cabal of people, some overlords and elites who are taking control of the earth, and it's us versus them, the little guys versus the big guys. You know, it's the populists versus the globalists. It's the progressives versus the neoliberals. It's the whatever, the humans versus the reptilians. You know, stuff like this. This just reeks of fear and us versus them, you know, sort of dualistic thinking. So, again, is this really truly in your direct experience, or are you just projecting these overlords and these elitists? How many of these elitists have you actually met? Have you actually gone and talked to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company? Have you sat down and had a 3-hour conversation with that CEO and actually got his perspective about business and the economy and how to run a company and what kind of problems exist with running a giant corporation? No, none of this is your direct experience. You just have theories and projections, and you're just projecting your angst and survival needs onto what you see in the news and stuff like that. This is not direct experience. This is not true open-mindedness. This is wild speculation and projection, which is actually a form of closed-mindedness, which is why all these conspiracy theorists are actually really closed-minded people. When you start to have conversations with them, they get very closed. You can actually feel that energy off them. They get kind of hot, agitated, neurotic. They start to attack. They start to, become unreasonable and start calling you names and things. And they start protesting and, kicking and screaming and bitching and moaning. All of these are signs of ego. This is not how a conscious, open-minded person behaves that's grounded in the truth, grounded in love, grounded in consciousness, grounded in selflessness, who's transcended fear. All these conspiracy theories are fear-based, which is why I don't traffic in them. So you also have to be careful, because the ego loves, since it's the devil, ego, devil, same thing. The ego loves to co-opt open-mindedness in order to spread its own ideology, conspiracy theories, and to fearmonger. So see, somebody else will come here and say, oh, well, Leo, you're not open to flat earth. You're not truly open. You're making fun of flat earthers, but I'm a flat earther and I know flat earthers, right? And that's because I'm open-minded. And Leo, Leo, look at how hypocritical you are. You're sitting up here and you're telling us to be open-minded, but you, Leo, you're actually closed-minded because you don't believe in my anti-vax conspiracy theories, and you don't believe in Alex Jones, and you don't believe in David Icke, and you don't believe in this, and you don't believe in that. But open-mindedness does not mean that I'm going to believe in all the fear-based shit that you believe in. See? And also, I'm not perfectly open-minded. Like I said in my series on self-deception is always operative. No matter who you are, how smart you are, how conscious you are, how enlightened you are, it's always operative. You always have to be on guard and careful with self-deception. So I'm always capable of self-deception. Sometimes I am closed-minded, and I apply the lessons that I'm teaching you. How do you think I learned these lessons? By observing my own closed-mindedness. I didn't read this in any book. I spent years observing my own closed-mindedness and my own ignorance, and have learned these lessons, and now I'm imparting them to you. And so even though I learn these lessons, I'm not perfect at executing them. Sometimes I am closed-minded about certain things. So again, it's not about a binary of being open or closed. It's about how open-minded are you? How well do you apply it? How good are you at noticing when you're being closed and then opening yourself back up? There's an emotional challenge that comes with open-mindedness. And that's, like I said, it leaves you in a sort of a uncertain place where you're sort of like a leaf blowing in the wind without firm resolution. It can be harder to make decisions because you have to constantly keep weighing things. It's like, well, there's, the Christians tell us this is true, and the Muslims tell us that's true, and the Hindus tell us this is true, and then science tells us that that's true, and then some other scientist says the opposite thing, and then somebody else says something else. Who am I going to believe? And it's like, well, I don't know who to believe, so I don't know what to do. Whereas if all you did was you said, well, okay, I'm just going to believe in Christ, and that's it, and I'm just going to believe in Christianity, and I'm just going to become an evangelical, well, okay, that makes you very decisive. You don't have to keep weighing all these factors. It's a much simpler way of approaching life. So what I'm talking about here is much more multidimensional and complex. It's a spiral dynamic stage yellow approach to reality, multi-perspectival. Yeah, it's tier 2. Much more complex than tier 1. Tier 1 is you choose one ideology, one worldview, and you just stick with it and you go all in on it. So this is stage yellow stuff. More difficult, more complex. Each stage of the spiral becomes more and more complex. If you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, go check out my multi-series, multi-part series called Spiral Dynamics, where I have different colored stages and explain those in a lot of depth. See, one of the benefits of having a closed mind is that you don't need to reevaluate anything. It just constantly builds upon itself. It doesn't take anything away. It never does any deconstructive work. It only adds more. So if you're a Christian, you just add more Christianity on top of the snowball, and it's just a giant growing snowball of Christianity, which eventually, after decades of that, it turns into something quite ugly. Veers completely off track from truth and consciousness and love. Whereas with an open mind, you're constantly having to reevaluate yourself. You're constantly having to consider whether you're fooling yourself. You're considering other points of view, exploring this stuff, and that takes more energy, more work. But also, there's payoffs to that. Here's another insight I'll give you. How do you open someone's mind? Let's say you're dealing with an ignorant person. Let's say your mother or your father, or you're trying to explain enlightenment to them or something, God or whatever you're trying to explain to them, and they're not seeing it. How do you open their mind? In one word, imagination. Imagination is an extremely powerful tool that most people overlook and poo-poo because, it's just imaginary. But then again, everything's imaginary. So that just shows you how powerful imagination is. So what you do to open somebody's mind is you get them to imagine a new possibility. And you try to do it in a non-confrontational, non-threatening manner. So rather than telling some Christian that, the Bible is bullshit, because that's just going to further close his mind, rather than doing that, if you really want to open his mind, present him with subtle possibilities that he can imagine that are beyond his paradigm. Not too far beyond, but a little bit beyond, that push the boundaries of his paradigm. So how might that look? Well, you might say, imagine, for example, like, where were you born? You might ask him, where were you born? Oh, you were born somewhere in Kentucky? Okay. And you're an evangelical? Okay. So what do you think would happen? Imagine, what if instead of being born in Kentucky, you were born in the Middle East? Would you still be an evangelical? Try to imagine that. Like, really imagine it. That's a very powerful exercise. That will quickly open your mind. Of course, he's probably going to have defenses because the mind's not going to give up so easily. But still, you can kind of keep prodding like this with these imagination exercises. If you're a teacher, if you're a professor in a college or university, if you're teaching young children in school or high schoolers or whatever, middle school, if you're trying to get your parents to understand something, come up with ways where you can phrase it as the following. Can you imagine blank? And then fill in that blank with whatever. Imagine this. Imagine that. Like, for example, let's say that there are some libertarian types who think that this coronavirus that we're dealing with right now, the coronavirus is not such a big deal. Let's just reopen the country. Everybody just go and back to the beaches and schools and all this sort of stuff. But then you can say, okay, so do you have a family? Do you have a daughter? Do you have a son? It's like, oh, you have a daughter. Okay. How old is your daughter? Oh, she's 8 years old. Okay. And how do you love your daughter? Okay, you love your daughter very much. Okay. How would you feel if when your daughter was in school, your daughter's teacher, for example, went out to a club or to a bar at night? She was just, letting off some steam, having some drinks after work, whatever. Teachers can do that. And then she caught the virus, and then she brought it back to school, and then your daughter got it. And then your daughter gets it, and then imagine that, you have a grandmother, okay, and then your daughter hangs out with your grandmother on the weekends, okay, imagine then she gives it to your grandmother. Imagine your daughter lying in a hospital bed with a ventilator down her throat, slowly suffocating, while you're sitting by her bedside, crying. Imagine that. Actually imagine that. If you can get that person to actually imagine that, That is what will change their mind. You see, the whole function of closed-mindedness is to prevent the imagination. So as long as you can get a person to imagine something, that already expands the boundaries of whatever ideology or paradigm they had. Because their ideology is sort of a mental thing. It lives in the level of thoughts and beliefs and stuff. But the imagination is actually more powerful than that. Imagination is a very powerful force. But oftentimes, because people are so bad at using it independently, you have to guide them to it, like really guide them step by step through all the details. Have them imagine a scenario, a compelling, powerful, emotional scenario like that, and then watch them get moved. Watch their mind change. Watch their paradigm expand. So this is part of what we might call spiral wizardry, where you start to get good at dealing with other stages, other people. You kind of meet them where they're at, see what their limitations are, come up with a scenario that they could imagine that helps them to then open their mind to new possibilities that then they can then pursue. You see, you can't really pursue something until you can first imagine it. You can't even go to the fucking grocery store unless you can first imagine it. You can't go to Australia. You can't take a nice vacation in Australia unless you can imagine it. And the more vividly and compelling your vision is going to be, the more likely you are to actually get online and purchase a ticket and actually fly there. See? And the nice thing about imagination is that imagination is kind of playful, and usually you can get people to imagine stuff. You can even get closed-minded people to imagine stuff. Like, you can even take some sort of fundamentalist Muslim and then just kind of walk him slowly through an imagination exercise where he really imagines the possibility that, for example, the Quran was not, the word of God handed down by God, but was actually written by some guy. If you kind of get him to really imagine through that, that will kind of break down some of his beliefs. Now, of course, there will probably still be resistance, but I'm not saying this is some sort of foolproof. Again, there's no force on earth strong enough to overcome a mind that is in complete denial and is so closed that it doesn't want to budge. There's nothing you can do about that. But you can use tricks. Most people are not that close-minded. You can use little tricks to open people up. And this helps you to be a better communicator if you want to be a public speaker, if you want to be persuasive, if you want to argue well, if you want to reason well with people, if you want to convince people, if you want to motivate people, if you want to be a leader, a great leader. You have to give people vision, a powerful, compelling, positive, loving vision of the future. See? And like, for example, if you're dealing with this Muslim person and, he's really stuck in his fundamentalism and he's really struggling to let go and he's in fear, you can guide him with a positive vision of like, imagine the freedom you would experience if you actually surrender your ideology about Allah. And then it's not that, imagine that, rather than imagining that you're going to forsake Allah and then Allah will cast you into hell or something like this, and that you will be lost without Allah. No. Imagine this. Imagine you let go of the idea of Allah, but then in its place, what you get is an actual direct connection with Allah. Imagine that. See, now that makes it much more palatable for that person to consider stepping beyond the bounds of his narrow belief-based ideology. Because you're taking away the ideology, but you're giving him some replacement. You're not just blaming him for being an idiot or something like that. See? So similar, like if you're a scientifically minded or an atheistically minded person, imagine this. And now this finally leads to how I want to demonstrate this to you. So this is how we're going to end this episode. And this is not just for scientists and atheists, but really for all of you. This is your ultimate open-mindedness exercise. You ready? Here we go. I want you to open your mind to the possibility of infinity. Infinity. Not a number. Not a collection of numbers. Actual infinity. Open your mind to the possibility of unlimited consciousness. Up to this point in your life, you've been living life conceiving of reality as a limited, finite thing. It has to be a particular narrow way. It's bound to 3 dimensions, or to time and to space, or to good and to evil, or to humans and animals, or to plants and trees, or to stars and our universe. This is all limited stuff. Now, I want you to drop that for just a moment. You can pick it back up in a minute. But just drop it for a minute and imagine a truly unlimited consciousness. Not a human, not an animal. It's not a physical object. It's not a particle. It's unlimited consciousness. Infinite consciousness. Imagine that the entire universe can be so conscious that it can be completely conscious of itself. Unlimited consciousness. Imagine an unlimited universe where there are no limits whatsoever. 0 limits. Anything is possible. Absolutely anything you can imagine is possible. Everything that can be imagined is possible. Pure, infinite imagination, without end, without limit, without restriction, unbounded by time, by space, by logic, by science, by religion, by fear, by matter, by limits of any kind. Infinity, true, actual infinity, completely self-knowing, completely omniscient, completely all-powerful, completely beautiful and perfect, singular, absolute, endless, existing forever, eternal, unconstrained by absolutely anything, because it's everything. It's absolutely total. Totality. Unlimited totality. Everything possible. Everything possible. Nothing is impossible. Open your mind to that. That's truth. That's reality. That's love. That's God. That's you. That's this. And that is what all open-mindedness leads to, is the realization of infinity. Your infinite consciousness, completely unlimited. All limitation completely imaginary, including limitations such as death. Imagine becoming so open-minded that you become completely omniscient, your consciousness becomes completely unlimited, and you literally become immortal as you realize the totality and unity of everything. As you recognize and see yourself in everything. As you become the entire universe. As you realize what reality is God. infinite, unlimited consciousness. And why is it this way? Because what would limit it? It's everything. So there can't be anything outside of it that could possibly limit it. Therefore, it's absolute, infinite perfection. Can you open your mind to that? If not, keep trying. And as your homework assignment over the next week, I want you to practice feeling when your mind is closed. If you're on a forum in a conversation with your parents or your friends or whatever you're doing, if you're watching the news and you see some latest shenanigan in politics happening and you notice your mind closing down, I want you to notice it and then practice opening it up. Even if the thing that's being considered might not be necessarily true, just practice opening up and noticing your biases. All right, that's it. I'm done here. Thank you. Please click the like button for me. Come check out Actualized.org. That's my website. You'll find my blog where I post exclusive content. You'll find the Life Purpose course, the book list, powerful book list that will start to get you on the same page as me. You know, a lot of the stuff I talk about, I sort of expect that you read the books on my book list in order to follow along. You can't just understand the things I talk about without reading the books on my book list. So there's that. You can also contribute to my Patreon if you'd like. If you like this in-depth content and you want to help me to build Actualized.org, I will be using these funds in the future to help do a little bit of promotion and to maybe do some new and exclusive type of content, higher quality content, increase production values, so forth. You can go to patreon.com/actualized to chip in $5 or something like that. Thank you very much for that. And my final words to you are this. Open-mindedness has completely changed the trajectory of my life. I have used open-mindedness to discover total omniscience and immortality. As outlandish as that sounds, it's true. So when I talk about this open-mindedness, I'm trying to lead you somewhere very powerful. Open-mindedness will take you way beyond science, way beyond Western philosophy, way beyond anything you could have possibly imagined. The fruits that open-mindedness yields are so rich and rewarding that they can't be described in words, but they take time to bear fruit. This is a seed that you plant. This is a seed, this open-mindedness seed is a seed I planted in my mind when I was a teenager. When I was 16 or 18 years old, this seed was planted in me, and this seed has grown and blossomed, matured over decades and years until finally it bloomed into an infinitely beautiful tree with infinitely many fruits. That's the real potential of open-mindedness. So now I want you to finally imagine the possibility that today we will plant this seed in your mind of open-mindedness, and that this seed will be planted and it's going to be nurtured by you. You're going to water it a little bit every day, every week for the rest of your life, and it's going to keep growing and growing. At first slowly, it's going to turn into a giant tree over years and decades, and it's going to keep sprouting fruits forever. For the rest of your life, it's going to keep sprouting more and more and more fruits until it completely changes the trajectory of your life. Open your mind to that possibility. And I'll see you in the next one.